Hi, and welcome to the Leader's Edge. So, I think we're constantly in crisis, right? Right now, if you think about the world, if we don't have crisis in our minds, something might be wrong with us. So today, I know, right? Because it's like one thing after another after another. There seems to be no break. So today we have Dionne Ligoure, a communications executive with us, and she's going to be sharing some tips with us on that. So before we get started, for awareness, how you think you or your company, if you are responsible or within your company, how are you all dealing with crises right now? How are you communicating crises or through crises whenever they occur in your organization? And maybe if you don't think you're rating highly on this, it might be a good one to stick around, and let's hear from Dion. So Georgia, please introduce our guest.
Thank you, Emily. Wonderful. It's always such a pleasure to be on The Leader's Edge, especially when we have distinguished guests. And ladies and gentlemen, guess who we have with us this morning? We have Dionne Ligoure. And when you think of Dionne, first name, middle name, last name, it's communications. And what's so unique is that Dionne, is it your company that's called DLC? And it's about dynamic leadership in communications.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, DLC,
Dynamic
Dynamic
leadership.
Leadership in Communications.
Yes.
Because Dion is a communications executive who has been in this business of communications for over 25 years. And the position that she now holds is Vice President of Corporate Communications and Corporate Affairs at Massey Group. So, Miss Dion, first name, middle name, last name, communications. What is it about communications that really strikes your fancy? Why have you spent so much time in it?
Well, I got into communications, I won't say by accident, because when I look back, communications has always been one of my stronger points, I would say. In school, I happened to be the captain of one of the schoolhouses, and time in office went very well. I still look back fondly on it because the house I led, which was Blessed Anne Marie House at St. Joseph's Convent, St. Joseph, had a reputation for coming last. When I took over the captaincy, I had an awesome vice captain, and we really managed to basically reset the house and the
Mhm.
energy of the house through. At that time, I would not have known that it would have been leadership and communications that would have been the driving force, but it
Mhm.
was. And then the very first term of the new captaincy, the house moved from last place to first place.
Wow.
All of these years later, when persons ask me what is one of your greatest accomplishments, I reflect fondly on my captaincy at Blessed Anne Marie, St. Joseph's Convent, St. Joseph. And there's a reason for that.
Hmm.
That would have been raw energy, passion, and communications. And so, what academia has allowed is really fine tuning of that, and of course, professional a life in an airline, and now at the Massey Group has allowed for refinement of those skills.
Mm.
But one of the fundamentals of communications, and I try to convey this to persons,
Mhm.
communications is a strategic function. It is
That's an important point.
it is a strategic function. Yes, there are tactical elements of it. So, for
Mhm.
example, writing speeches, press releases, and so on, but that's really the end. Communication starts at the table of leadership, and persons would find that they get the most impact of their communications function when communications is included from the start. It
Mhm.
is even more sensitive in the context of crisis communications.
Yes.
Yes.
And very often people use in an interchangeable way crisis communications and crisis management, and they're actually not the same.
Mhm.
Crisis management really involves the overall coordination of an organization's response to a crisis. So,
Mhm.
what it does, it focuses on resolving the incident and minimizing the harm to operations, your finances, and most of all, your people. So,
Mm-hmm.
it involves managing the crisis itself, right?
Mhm.
Crisis communications, however, is a subset of crisis management, so to speak, and it is really dedicated to communicating information and updates during the crisis to your stakeholders. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not one and the same. So the crisis management team, for example, will be the lead on your strategic decisions and fixing the problem. Whereas the crisis communications team supports the crafting of the messages, the delivering of the messages that fall in line with those decisions. So
Yeah.
it's important that we make that distinction very
Yes.
early on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes when we're not very organized, that is when things can get, meaning we haven't planned or have
Yes.
contingency measures in place, the business continuity side of things. So
Mm-hmm.
something happens and we have no idea how to respond. That's when things can go very, can go south very quickly.
Yes.
So what are some tips in terms of, you already just mentioned one, that, well, obviously for organizations, having the plan, having a crisis management uh, team framework plan, so that there's something to refer to, bringing in communications from the start, so communications is always included as part of the management team, if you want, of in terms of when there is a crisis. What are some of the other things or aspects of crisis communications that makes it so important or critical that we nail it, so that it really supports what the organization wants to
Mm-hmm.
achieve?
Let me go before that, Emily.
Sure.
What is paramount is having persons in positions of leadership who actually have an understanding of and an appreciation for the corporate communications function. And I cannot begin to tell you how significant that is. That is that is a make or break for an organization,
Mm-hmm.
because when you have persons in positions of leadership who are obsessed with optics more than substance and content, you will and hear me well, you will inevitably run into problems.
Mm-hmm.
So a starting point is leadership who actually have a clue about why corporate communications and why communications is important, because all of that filters in to your crisis communications preparedness. And
Hmm.
plain and simple talk, why is preparedness important? Your reputation is at stake,
At stake.
right? There are consequences of no comes plan, because without you get caught in a crisis, you can appear to be very disorganized and
Mm-hmm.
worse than that, negligent, because
Hmm.
a lack of clear information causes your stakeholders, inclusive of your employees,
Mm-hmm.
become confused. Persons could become angry, and then they may be prone to panic, and you really don't want that.
Yeah. And
So,
Dion, I mean, even, sorry,
Yeah.
no, I
no,
was
no,
going
I was
to
just
say,
going to
even,
say a part two. Sounds like a part two is coming, Emily. The
yeah.
information that Dion is sharing.
But before before we get there, I'm thinking that even more so, it's even more critical now. Because I mean, when you're saying that, I am remembering national crises that occurred in our country, which were poorly managed, and without calling any names, and social media was all over. So I think one of the key, and you said reputation. The thing is, everybody's on social media. So if you are not ahead of it, you lost the
Yes.
game already, right? The
Yes.
story
That
went, the story is gone.
that actually was my next point.
Oh, sorry.
Speed speed saves the narrative. What do I
Wow.
mean by that? Time is the most crucial, hear my language well, the
Mhm.
most crucial ally in a crisis. I
Mm.
Wow.
remember when the Malaysian aircraft disappeared. I happened to be up, I don't doing at God knows what. I am there when the news broke, and I am there almost anxious, waiting on a statement from the airline, and I'm like, what is going on here? And they lost control of that narrative from the jump. The
Yeah.
first few hours often are the deciding factors. It often decides whether you contain the issue or whether you face lasting reputational damage.
Yes.
Because what happens very simply is that delayed responses amplify crises. And in
Mm-hmm.
this time of social media, what it does, it invites suspicion, it allows others to frame your story. And we're not talking about, when you talk about an initial statement, hear my language well, an initial statement is not 10 paragraphs. An initial statement is, we are aware of the situation and we are investigating. And you have no idea how much goodwill just that simple statement and acknowledgement can provide you.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah,
Yes.
it
That's key.
it
That is
fills
key.
it fills a void, and it
Correct.
prevents an information void.
Yeah. And
Right.
it prevents the anxiety that people are having
Correct.
because they could feel comforted by the fact that something was said. So
Mm-hmm. And someone
now
cares.
you bought yourself some time. You can't now leave this on, that forever, but you bought yourself some time to come up with the next response or to provide
Right.
Right.
the second
Right.
statement that comes. Yeah.
Right. And
Dion, I wanted to ask you something before you move on to another point, a quick one,
oh, of
because
course.
I have seen this before at executive levels,
Mm-hmm.
where an executive, a senior person, the CEO, whoever he or she is, who feels that he or she needs to be the voice of the organization, but that person may not have the level of credibility that is needed or even articulate enough. Have you ever faced a situation like that? And how would you handle such a situation?
Mm-hmm.
Well, fortunately for me, I have not faced that situation. And the reason I haven't faced the situation is that the protocols
Ah,
for who responds in the crisis were outlined beforehand.
a
Right.
Be
wonderful
assured
piece of the puzzle.
that you are burying yourself not 6 feet but 12 feet under. If
Mm-hmm.
when a crisis occurs, you are then deciding who is going to speak and who is this and who is that. Because
Yes.
while you are deciding that, time is going.
Yeah.
So, for example, in my former employee's position,
Mm-hmm.
there were three persons authorized to speak on behalf of the airline. It was
Right.
the chairman, the CEO, and the executive manager of corporate communications, which is the position that I held.
Mm-hmm.
I have a fundamental piece. Never waste a crisis. Never waste a crisis, because there's so much you can handle a crisis smoothly with minimal damage, and you will still have lessons to learn. And that is a critical element of crisis management, that golden feedback that arises after the crisis.
Yeah. I never looked at it that way. Never, what you said, never waste a
Never
crisis.
waste a crisis.
Never
Yeah.
waste.
Yes.
Because you it made me think that, when crises, well, the converse is true, right? When it happens poorly, or when it unfolds poorly, it creates a lasting negative impact on your reputation. But if it's handled well, it creates credibility. You can build goodwill with your customers because you would have managed the crisis so well. Because people, I mean, we live in a world where we just said crises happen all the time, right? Whether it's natural or man-made, there are always, crises occurring, especially nowadays. So I think the expectation is for an informed and empathetic response that really, as you said, acknowledges all parties, all stakeholders, and helps people to allay whatever fears or concerns that may be arising because of this crisis, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes your response has to be firm. So if, for example, to your audience, I had to give a checklist of sorts,
Mm-hmm.
it would be: one, you distinguish your roles. Ensure that your organization has both a crisis management plan, and that will determine how you tackle the incident, and a crisis communications plan, which is how you manage the information. And you have to clearly differentiate who handles operations versus who handles communications, because they must, of necessity, coordinate, but they have different and distinct tasks. They
Mm-hmm.
have distinct tasks. There are also risk assessments.
Mm-hmm.
So, in your planning, you have to list potential crisis scenarios. What happens with a cyber attack, a natural disaster, the threat of war, which are situations that are becoming more real to us.
To
And
us.
then
Yes.
you rank them in by likelihood and impact. So, for example, a threat of war may be low likelihood, but it could be high impact, and
Impact.
high impact from the potential disruption that it presents to supply chains and to life in general,
Yeah.
right? Then you have to have a crisis comms plan. You have to develop a written crisis communications plan, including your activation criteria. When does this kick in?
Mm-hmm.
Including an
Mhm.
updated directory for your crisis team and your key stakeholders. What are the communication protocols? And of course, pre approved workflows for messages. You cannot look during a crisis to start to craft messages. It
Yes.
is defeatist. And you have to ensure that your plan is accessible both in hard copy and soft copy. Everyone is saying, and I am all for saving the trees. But if you have a situation where your information infrastructure is broken, it is not available, what are you going to say? Well, we don't have access to the plan?
Mhm.
That can't happen. Then, of
They
course,
need to have a contingency for that.
yeah,
Yes.
you have to have your designated comms team, your pre-drafted statements, your stakeholder mapping, your media and channel prep, and of course, some people may think, oh, well, we could put anybody to speak, the executives. Your executive may be, for example, a very talented accountant or a
Mm-hmm.
very talented finance person, and you put them in front of a camera, and as the old folks say, all fall down.
All fall down. they, they
Yeah.
freeze like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And
it
that's
is
just not their skill set. It's just not.
correct. And it is
It's not their skill set.
unfair to put your executives to speak without proper training. So
Right.
Exactly.
that's a point that
Preparation.
you train your spokespersons, you train your crisis team,
Mm-hmm.
right? And these are, you have simulation drills. We could talk about this for a long time.
Mhm.
Oh, for sure, Dion. Guess what
Yes.
this is like for us now? This is like a master class that we're giving persons who are listening and watching. Emily, I think this episode we're going to have to say master class in crisis communication.
Yeah, so that, and there are a number of things. You have to have monitoring systems. And during your crisis, then, what are some of the guiding principles? And some of the guiding principles include, well, we mentioned acting fast,
Mhm.
being transparent, and caring depending on what the situation is,
Yes.
so that you coordinate your messages tone of your messages, the
Mm-hmm.
slant of it, how it is presented, all of those are important.
Right.
And critically, your post crisis review.
Mm.
Oh.
So I've run through elements of a checklist there. And by following this checklist and now communications is strategic and it is also a process. And what that
Mhm.
means is you have the delight of continuous refinement.
Right.
So these things are not carved in stone there. You know, some people like to, oh, we have a plan. Where's the plan? It's on a shelf. What good is it on a shelf?
Dust it off.
Correct. You have to continually refine it because what it will do is strengthen your organization's readiness to handle a crisis.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my
Whatever,
word, yeah.
whatever
You
crisis
broke it
is
down.
true.
Correct.
Sorry, Georgia. What?
Yes, no, I'm saying she has broken it down bit
Yes.
by bit, step by step. That checklist, yes. We have to get that, Emily. So we post that checklist. Well, Emily, I think we have gotten the awareness piece. We have gotten the inspiration, Dionne's experience in the field. And she has also shared some things that people can do right off the bat. It's over to you now, Emily, to wrap the show.
Yeah, yeah. So, in collecting my thoughts on all that Dion said, and there's a lot that Dion said. So, if you are interested in this topic, you probably need to listen and watch this a
Yes.
few times. And of course, what she said, as she said, is a checklist. So each one of those things, there's a whole set of
Correct.
things under that,
Underneath.
underpinning each. So, I mean, crisis communication is critical. That's what Dion said. And we
Mhm.
know this. We've experienced it. We've experienced it when it's good. We've experienced it when it's not good. And it's imperative for the reputation of your company. It's also imperative that it forms part of your whole crisis response, your management response. And
Mhm.
if you don't have a business continuity as yet,
Mhm.
uh, please ensure that you or that you all look at that, because that is key, right? That's part of how this whole thing is developed and tested. And when we have to implement it, because we've been testing it, because we know what it is and how to execute, it helps us
Mhm.
in times. And the timeliness, I mean, there's so many critical points that Dion mentioned, but I think the bottom line is
Yes.
prepare, because crises are happening around us all of the time now.
Mhm.
It's always been, but in every business situation, there is potential for us to have to execute such plans and ensure that you have one, so that when it's your turn, you can show up in the
Yeah.
best way possible.
So true,
So that's
Emily.
it.
As Dion said, don't waste a crisis.
And yes, exactly.
Don't
So,
waste a
Dion, I just want to thank you so much for your time and your expertise with us this morning. I'm assuming that all of our audience will really appreciate this, especially these days, because there's so much looming potential
Mhm.
crises around us.
wait.
you know,
Hotline.
so we definitely need to dust off those plans. So,
Yes.
thank you for the
Thank
time.
you so much for having me. And for persons who want more communications tips, they can feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, it's simple. My name, Dionne Ligoure. You'll find me there. I share communication tips from time to time. So it has been a pleasure, ladies. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to guest with you. And I hope that the listeners have gotten, some tidbits that could be useful to them in their daily lives and in their businesses.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it, dear. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.